Seconds, let everybody in. Brandon, Putra, Bikram.
Okay, so you need to enable screen sharing for me.
Yeah. And there we go.
Putra.
Hey, Phil. Hey, everyone.
Oh, morning, Brendan.
You should be good now, Mark.
Okay, let's try again.
So,
All right.
over to you, Mark. Welcome, everybody. We're now live streaming as well, which is quite great. Over to you, Mark. Welcome, everybody. We're now live streaming as well, which is quite great. We're having an introduction to TWI, training within industry. And we're going to have a brief introduction, and then we're going to pop over to the meat and potatoes of today's talk, which is the Q&A session, which Mark's excited for, and so am I. So, Mark, over to you.
Okay, so let's see if I can get this thing to do. Okay. All right, so you've got the, oh, this kind of messes it up. Anyhow, so you've got the introduction to TWI. So I'm going to focus on job instruction, but I really need to start and tell everybody that there are 3 common programs associated with TWI. And actually there are more, but these are the 3 primary ones. These are the ones that Toyota used most extensively. And what most people don't realize is they talk about the 5 needs of the supervisor. So you have 2 knowledge pieces and 2 skills. And so over the resurgence of TWI in the last 20 or 30 years, everybody's just focused primarily on the job instructions and somewhat on job relations, and almost nothing has been done on job methods. But one of the things they've overlooked is the focus on the knowledge of responsibilities. And to a large degree, this is what you're doing with 2-second lean, is the leaders are actually engaging and trying to work closely with the employees. So I want this to be sort of a collegiate piece. Stop me anytime, anybody, and ask a question, and I will. I can go down the rabbit hole, and I can take hours on any one of these pieces, but I'm trying to keep it at the top level so we can make it easy for everybody. So to give you an idea about Toyota, this is their first year supervisors training book. So you can see the JI, they're still teaching the job instruction almost verbatim is what it was 70 years ago. The job relations got rolled into Toyota communications program probably in the 1990s, if my memory serves me correctly. And the JM got absorbed about 1955 into the Toyota production system. So it's really hidden inside Toyota. It's their Kaizen process improvement sort of thing. But the other piece, they still recognize the 2 knowledge levels, like the knowledge of the jobs and the knowledge of responsibilities is being a critical part. So on the job instruction, let's see, a couple of months ago, I think, I went up to Will's operation, the Tennessee Cheesecake, and we did a one of the days I was there in his morning meeting, I gave a presentation and did an example of a job breakdown and a training exercise. And he's posted on YouTube this little video. I think most everybody may have seen it.
Yeah.
So, and last week think it was last week. Yeah, last week I was there. And so we went over doing a job breakdown in his oven area. And so it was him and about 5 other people, and we walked through it. But before we wrote this down, I did what's called a high level overview. So we said, okay, so what are the major steps? You got a question?
No, sorry, I've just noticed there
Okay.
was another 6 people in the waiting room.
Oh,
They're all
sorry.
in now. Apologies, guys, for the delay in allowing you in. You were late, but I didn't do it on purpose.
Oh, that's my fault. I set up a Teams meeting and a Zoom meeting, so I
Oh,
confused my team.
no worries, no worries. We're all here now. It's a good attendance. If we can all mute, and Mark, you can kick off again, please.
Do you want me to start from the beginning?
No, I think we just carry on.
Okay.
Somebody needs to mute. Sounds
I
like they've got.
think I am. Sorry.
Mark, just a suggestion. If you want to put up the display settings to increase the size of the presentation.
There, we're there.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Mark, back to
Okay.
you.
So one of the prerequisites I do before I actually do a breakdown is I walk through and say, okay, what are the steps? What are the functions that you do? I go through it like at a high level. So this was the person who operates the oven. So what do? Oh, they go get a rack of cheesecakes. They bring it in. They select an oven. They open the oven up. They put it in. They set the time and temperatures, and basically, and then they actually had to put something on the log. So we walked through all those and said, okay, so where do you get most of your quality and safety problems? It's around actually putting it in the right oven, because we have multiple products, and getting the time and temperatures. So we went through step by step all the steps, and then for each step, what are the key points? So Will has done a good job in this little video where I've explained how to pick out the key points. And this is the make or break piece for doing a job breakdown. So the first thing you look for each step is,
Sorry, Mark.
Yes.
Could you go on to full display rather than like presentation? So it's small. It's a small screen. I think it's the third.
Yeah, hit display settings at the top there. Top.
Okay.
Left. Yeah. Hit either swap presenter view, because I assume you have another screen.
Yeah, that's much better.
Perfect.
Nice
Thank you.
improvement. Stop and fix. Well
Need to
called,
split
Jim.
Oh, okay. So I didn't realize you were seeing all the other screens too. Sorry about that. So okay. One of the interesting things that came out is, since he's a food safety, he has a lot of prerequisites. And I know there are a number of industries where you have safety prerequisites where you have to have your PPE. And so a lot of times you'll put right at the very top of step 0, PPE, and then you'll list the PPE that you need to have or do. And that's critical, every time. It gets redundant, but it's a good habit to put that in. So on the very first step, and we're talking about the key points for the step. So you always start off with safety. What must you do to ensure the operator's safety? What should you do to ensure the safety of everybody around them? Any safety issues downstream? And so for food safety, you have a lot of things for covering the contamination and such. But the next piece is, from a quality perspective, what must I do to get the desired outcome? So temperature's got to be right, timing's got to be right for cooking something. And the last piece is, what can I do to make the job easier? And this is where you sort of discover, with the people who've been around for a long time, what are the shortcuts that basically that they can do to make the job easier. And what I generally find is if you have somebody who's been there for several years, this is that kind of embedded knowledge that you want to capture. So you pick out the people who have basically the best quality or best outcomes from a quality perspective, lowest safety risk, shortest cycle times to do the job. And those are the people you want to pick their brain. You really want to capture best practice, and those are the people that have your best practice. And that's one of the pieces you try to do and get into the job breakdown. And so, okay, the rules around doing a job breakdown is you do not have to have a key point to have a step. So a step is something that moves the work forward. It's basically a value-added piece. But if you find yourself listing 5 or more key points, that's probably such a complicated step that you need to make its own separate breakdown so you can teach this step as its own training module. And for every key point, you should have a reason why. And
Here,
try to state
Mark,
it as
can
yeah,
I stop? Like,
yeah.
what's for the job breakdown? What's the primary objective?
Okay.
Mm.
So from a historical standpoint, it was basically onboarding and getting people close to competent to do jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
you,
to develop a training tool, is that what it's for?
well, originally it was just to help onboard and shorten the training time dramatically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then they began to realize that this structured methodology of observing and describing the jobs improve the supervisor or the leader's ability to actually solve problems, because one of the things that comes out as you're doing the breakdown is you realize there's a lot of weak spots
Yeah.
or places for improvement. I mean, that's just one of the general outcomes. So you've increased your basically your
Your knowledge
structured
of the
ability.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
So
your ability. Yeah, the
so basically
observation.
the process of doing the job breakdown improves your knowledge and often improves the process itself, because the very activity of, oh, we've got a weak spot there, you address it if it can be done on the spot. And you're going to get an improved process as a result of doing the job breakdown. But it wasn't the primary objective to start with. Historically, the primary objective was to develop a training tool to onboard people faster. Is that
Yep.
right?
That was the original piece, and then there were a lot of unintended consequences that actually had a lot of value. So as you're beginning to actually describe the steps very clearly, you can now do good problem solving. Now, then as a supervisor, so the job relations, they call it the Toyota, they've modified it, and it's using a lot of this into the Toyota communication skills. So as a supervisor or leader, you're trying to describe for people how I want this project done, what I need to have done each day. And so a supervisor that uses this for a while begins to structure, okay, I need this item A, B, C, D. Here's the key points that I think need to be done to get a good job or to get the correct outcome. And so it begins to structure how you actually communicate with people. And the next level in the 50s, they begin to realize that, hey, I can do basically a job breakdown on the leader's standard work. And so you can, basically the supervisor's level, you can really define maybe 80% of what their work is. As you go up the ladder toward the owner or plant manager, it gets reduced, but you still have a core of standard work that you can describe and do like this.
Mm-hmm. Understood.
Okay. So here's an example of a job breakdown. This is the t-shirt folding example. If you go back to the video that I did with Will, This just explains it. I usually try to keep around 5 steps. I mean, the rule of thumb when I do a training module is I want to be able to show it and explain through the steps in a minute or two, no more. If it's longer than that, the people are not going to remember it. So you really do the training in very small chunks, and you do it over and over until they master it. So the first cycle through, I do a show and tell where I do a show and tell only the steps. Then I walk back through, and then I show and tell the steps and the key points and the reasons why.
So Mark, another one to just bring out there.
Yep.
So the kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, which wouldn't be a major shocker. If this kind of process that we use this approach for has some level of repeating. So it's not like a task that you do every week or 3, but yeah, like, the shirt wrapping one, like
Okay.
you're not, how can I put it, within a manufacturing context, like for example, I'm going to clean down that machine every month.
Yep.
Is there value in that having the tool? I can understand, but are you going to use it in a training way like that?
Oh, okay. So one of the questions in the group that was sent to me is like, okay, so how do I use it in a bespoke or like a smaller shop? And this is the problem is like in the U.S., roughly 80% of manufacturing sites have less than 20 employees, and I think it's about 90% in Europe have less than 20 employees. And at that level, you're occasionally small shops doing only 1 or 2 items, but mostly your shop's doing a general type of work, but they vary dramatically. And one of the places I have done, it's a big, it's a multinational, but this particular operation had several hundred employees, but their average lot size was between 1 and 5 pieces. And so there's no way you could do job breakdowns on how to do each individual one. The return on investment was not there. So what we said, okay, what are the standard tasks? I have a piece of material and, like a specialty piece of material. I'm chucking it up in a lathe. All right. So there's some knacks about chucking it and doing the run out. How do you use certain tools? How do you do the certain inspections? So we did the job instruction on how to use.
So on the generic processes.
On the
basically.
generic processes.
Yeah. So we're looking at a higher level than at the part number in that circumstance. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get at. And so like, just from a Gembadox customer type of perspective, that's what most of them look like. And most of them are using it in that way. And even I would say a lot of how do I turn on the machine? How do I turn off the machine? How do I clean the machine? How do I change the filter in the machine? Often they're not even what I'd call production tasks. They're ancillary tasks that they're using these little SOPs for as a help to people who might not do them every day and as an onboarding tool.
Yep. So I was going to look through, gosh, anyhow, I don't really need to look it up right now. So
you don't need to look it up.
No, there's actually, David Meyer wrote a book about Toyota's use of job instruction, and he has an illustration, and I think he also has the same illustration in his Toyota Way field book. So it shows like a job tree, and so you say, okay, and his job as a manager at Toyota was the manager over their injection molding for the bumpers. And so you say, you've got a injection molding machine operator. You have task of actually making the bumper. You have task of inspection. You have task of maintenance. So he had the ancillary task laid out like that. And so, and some work I've been doing with an aerospace company in Europe, they are doing what we call a job tree. And if you look at an individual's job, you have maybe 100 tasks that they do. But inside that, they'll have 10 to 20 tasks that are really critical that they know how to do well. And that's where you should start on making your job breakdowns or your Gemba docs. It maybe the question would be, if you don't know how to do this well, would you create a safety issue?
Mm-hmm.
Would you create a quality
Yeah,
issue?
quality issue.
Yep.
If it's not done properly, do we have safety, quality? Cost is also
Yep.
another thing. You're going to scrap, well,
Well,
arguably scraps quality, of course. But yeah,
well,
are we going to take a long time when we shouldn't take a long time?
all of
So
it leads back to
yeah,
cost.
yeah, it does.
But
Yeah,
but
no,
if you
cool,
look at
no, cool,
those,
Mark. That's right. That's really helped clarify for me a little bit. I'm asking these questions on behalf of the group as much as I am myself as well. So feel free, anyone, to
great.
pipe up.
Yeah. So if you make a job tree, you could make the job tree first, and then you can come back and say, okay, it's almost like the Kaizen burst that you see on the value stream maps. You can come back and say, okay, which ones are critical that I must know to be able to functionally
Mm-hmm,
do the job, which
mm-hmm,
from safety and quality. And you're going to find 10 to 20 pieces that and this is where you should start. And anytime you have like a quality or safety issue, almost always somebody did not follow, either missed or did not follow the key point, or you don't have a key point in there and you haven't trained them properly on it.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Or the other piece is you may not have a process that's capable, which means then I need to do problem solving and then challenge it to try to improve it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And even if if it's not known to be capable, what special measures am I taking to contain it?
Yep. And so there's there's problem solving, and actually the problem solving is not just coming up with a solution, but the very first stage is you really need to deeply understand functionally what needs to be done, and the key points can help you walk through what must be done to get a good outcome, and then you can drill down to that one key point is not functionally getting the consistent outcome. Then I go through a fact finding process. I want to find as much of the facts about that as possible. That allows me to make good guesses on possible solutions going forward. So next, one of the rules I like to tell people is like, where do you make the job breakdown? And if I go into big corporations, most engineers, they want to sit in the comfort of their nice air conditioned office and not go out on the shop floor where it's dirty and hot and nasty or cold or whatever. And I'd say it's impossible for you to effectively do the breakdown, in the office. So go out, go to the Gemba, as they say. So the other piece is most people want to write it by themselves. You don't want to do it by yourself. You want to involve other people. As much as you may know about the process, you may have some bias in there, some opinions that are not exactly accurate, and you want to bring in other subject matter experts. And that's like rule 3. And I usually like to get at least 2 subject matter experts as possible, if possible. Basically, what I've said before, the most skilled operators, the people who are the fastest, the people who have the least quality rejects, that sort of thing. And I can tell a story or recount a story from David Meyer when his coach from Japan was asking him about making breakdowns in the injection molding. And the Japanese fellow asked him, well, what's the fastest cycle time? And David told him, he said, well, that's the new standard. David said, no, that's just the absolute fastest person. And so he says, David, your job is to make the process easy enough so everybody can do that cycle time. So they always took the best cycle time as the target. and that's your responsibility to get it that way. So
Like
the last,
for me, Mark, even
Yep.
when you're doing a more simple exercise like doing a Gemba doc, if it's for an important task, this is the way to go. That same process. It's the same, write the job where the work is done, do it as a team. Not talking about changing the printer cartridge, but anything that's safety or quality critical. It's
Yep.
best to invest the time to have at least two people do the initial document. And then as well, including the subject matter experts not only makes the job breakdown better, but improves the ownership for the team. They don't feel like it's been done to them if you're doing it with including the people, obviously.
So the first time you do a job breakdown on a task, it's really more of a knowledge capture. And your first draft always has errors. So my suggestion is you get at least two of the people that help make the breakdown, and possibly three, and you assign them roles of a trainer, a learner, and an observer. And so one person uses the breakdown to basically do a trial run walkthrough of a learner, and another person observes it, and you're going to catch, oh, I don't have the sequence right, oh, I forgot something, that sort of piece, that sort of thing. So, and you get everybody to rotate the roles till everybody's played, every one of the roles. And the outcome of that is you get a fairly good first round breakdown. You also come up with three people who are now comfortable enough actually delivering the training. They've had a bit of repetition, and they can now deliver training on that particular task. So it's not uncommon to see multiple iterations. So you've done like the first draft, you go by a week, couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, and you find another an improvement, and you modify it. So, first edition, second edition, third edition, that sort of thing. And I think you made a comment in the group about that a lot of people are updating their Gemba docs over time.
Well, for sure. Yeah, very much so.
So, so the other piece is you're kind of trapped often in writing almost a novel, and I like the step to be 2, maybe 3 words, and it needs to be an object and an action. So if you think of the lean from the value added standpoint, value added is always a change or transformation of your product or service. So that kind of ties in with doing the important step. And this particular one was one I did 10 or 15 years ago. And as we did it, the operators said, well, there's actually only 2 areas that turned out to be most of the source of their quality issues. And they were complicated enough, and we really wanted to focus. So we made each one of these coaching. And so when we did training, we would actually train one piece, and we do it over and over until the operator got very comfortable, and they would move on to the second operation. As an aside for this, what we began to notice is actually a lot of the breakage happened in, this one is the sand core in a molding operation, is they had irregularities in that. And so we went upstream to a process to improve that step, which then began to eliminate all sorts of defects downstream. So this forces you to look at the processes close enough, and actually will uncover and help you improve your quality.
Sorry, Mark, could you just briefly touch upon that common key point that was in the example you gave?
Oh, and this
That
one?
just yes, at the top. Porosity defects 30% is just that the common defect observed for the process.
Okay, so this was an intake manifold, if my memory serves me correctly, for a small engine. And so you have basically a hollow core. Well, it has to be hollow, and they put in a sand core to make the inside part of the casting. So you've got a steel external casting, and then you're injecting aluminum into the mold. And if the core happened to break, then that aluminum would some of it would get into the crack, and so then you would have a little thin web that reduces the airflow, making and it was nearly impossible to clean out after the fact. So yeah, what they had was, I think, I'm trying to read this. I think it was about 30% originally, and they got it down to just a couple of percentage points. Does that answer your question?
I'm just trying to better understand that common key point. What we should be identifying in that field at the top there. Common key point. Porosity defects 30%.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, the common, that particular piece. This is almost like from job relations and the problem solving. You say, okay, what's my objective? What's my reason for digging this out? And so they selected this particular process and this particular part number because they had a high number of defects.
Okay.
I mean, so I've kind of blended in the job relations. I've got a reason why I did this. I focused on doing this one first. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you so much.
Okay. So if I go back to this first one, these are just stock programs, and the training was 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's scripted, it's structured, and the reason it was scripted is they were trying to get very consistent results no matter who did the training. And I have actually gone away from the standard 10-hour training program. So if you have hundreds of employees, yes, it would probably be good because you put 8 to 10 people in a room. They spend a week, and the trainer should be teaching them and coaching them on the shop floor. If you had an internal trainer, but now more and more people are smaller shops, and I'd go at it a good bit different when I do the smaller shops and on the shop floor. I actually want to go out on the shop floor and we physically walk through all the practice there on the shop floor.
Mark, just to ask a really fundamental question.
Yeah.
For a small outfit, without using a consultant, are they going to get real value? Are they going to have the expertise deep enough to really avail of this? It's a hard question. I know I'm not trying to put you on the spot in any way. It's really
right.
It's a genuine question of discovery. Like, can we do a slimmed down version that would easily carry over to SME? Do you understand what I'm getting at, or is that like disrespecting the whole approach?
So yeah. So the places that are going to, the certified trainers, they're going to charge you at least $10,000 for a week.
Mhm.
They would do 2 groups. The downside is when you've paid that much, everybody tries to cram more people in there. Functionally, it only works good up to about 8 people in this structured environment. You don't get enough one-on-one practice, and the trainer must coach on the shop floor in between the sessions. You're going to pay, 10,000 to, I think at last I heard, some of the trainers are getting up to $18,000 to $20,000 for a week.
Mm-hmm. Not
That's
bad
kind
one.
of that's kind of pricey for the smaller companies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now I've been talking with a trainer who's retiring, and we're saying we could probably make a series of YouTube videos and shrink it down, because part of the first session in every piece is teaching this thing about the 5 needs of a supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
And like inside job instruction, there are 4 core things that you learn inside there. I can walk you through. You're going to do a lousy job the first one. It's going to take you about a dozen job breakdowns to begin to get comfortable doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think if you and me, or maybe another 1 or 2 people, if we sat down and actually did a set of YouTube videos,
I'd be really interested in doing that, because the whole, like, my whole personal lean journey has been from what I call corporate lean, which is like
Mhm.
throwing lots of money around, and you can't get your consultants in and your flip charts and everything. And but where my passion really is where we can bring it to the SME, which is a much larger and diverse audience, and they're much more hungry for it. And nobody's really trying to help them, because they know that the average SME isn't going to throw 20 grand at it. So coming up with a condensed program that, like, I'll give you my own experience from a slightly different area of what I consider lean. So take advanced quality planning, for example. This is probably going to be gobbledygook to lots of people on this call, but we do failure mode and effect analysis and control plans, and we can do gauge repeatability studies and lots of high-end quality techniques. But lots of them on an 80-20 basis, you can boil it down to 2 techniques that really hit home. So if you take the basic failure mode and effect and you take the control plan, you can relatively apply this and get a lot of the benefit in a very simplistic way with a lot less, let's say, friction. So I think that there's probably an opportunity to do something with this. And even within what we do with software, Brendan raised a question there in the chat. We've thought many times of doing a job breakdown within Gembadocs, and there was always this, my fear was making it so complex we drive users away. But having something that we developed specifically for the, let's say, the more demanding, discerning user who wanted to take it another level up, and then developing the software in a way that helped people understand the process a lot better. Maybe it's we'll take it offline, but I do see the difficulty for the SME, where you haven't got that skilled person in your own organization or a Mark Warren to come and help you. And it's like, well, how do I apply this? And I think we need a 80-20 version that we can deliver to them in a way that they can digest and get value from. I don't know if anyone else in the call wants to speak up and speak to that, or
Well,
uh,
my opinion is, if you're running a business, you have enough gumption to learn just about anything. And like the 80-20 rule, I really feel like if, and I'm open to maybe doing some job breakdowns on site at some people's companies if they're willing to share the video, and we can do the pieces, and we can actually make a on-site physical. I mean, it's not going to be a training room example,
mm-hmm.
but it's going to be, we'll walk through, here's the skills that you're doing, like inside job instruction. Most people don't know about the gimbal walks. I mean, the gimbal walks today are nothing more than industrial tourism. Originally, this was a observation method and development for you to learn to see the problems, strategically think, okay, what needed breakdowns to do improvement? What problems do I need to solve? Who do I need to train by what day? And so it also comes out and eventually gets to your skills matrix that you have.
Mhm.
But we could, I really feel like we can do a set of videos if somebody's volunteering to do some video editing. And then
I can get
maybe,
that done. Yeah, I'm
okay,
there. I
and
have people these days to do that.
okay, and then a host location that doesn't mind showing how they do maybe a couple of tasks.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
We could put something together that I think an average shop would be able to get as much value out of as bringing a consultant in for a week.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, that sounds worth doing.
Yeah.
So
So selfishly, I'll throw my hat in the ring.
yeah, I
I mean, we're completely we're
yeah.
completely transparent. You know,
Uh-huh.
one of my side goals is to help my industry adopt this. So, I mean, we have no trade secrets that we have any problem
Brandon, that's
showing. So
awesome. And
let's talk
I'd
offline,
like to
Mark.
yeah, let's talk offline. I'd like to come along as well. Any excuse to get on a plane.
Uh, so yeah, so I'm not sure who
That's
was
great. No,
offering.
that's good. Yeah, Brandon, that sounds great to me. Let's take that up offline. That's a
Okay,
great outcome from this call where we're going to move in something into action. I'm picking
okay,
up too many to-dos lately, Brandon.
okay. So so one of the other pieces is um, they had pocket cards, and it's basically like a cheat sheet. Here's
Uh-huh.
what you need to do,
This
and
is joyous, by the way. I think for us SME people, this is just like this is gold right here.
so job instruction. I mean, you can list, okay, you have a training timetable. This was where you walked through and looked at what needed to be done. You know, who needs to be trained, what skills, when the training is going to be done. Have an objective. Your your objective, like the one before, I have this particular product that I'm having to put 30% of it back into the tank and melt it down again because it was, defective. I want to get down to say 2% or less. But anyway, then you have the piece of breaking down the job. Then we have the skill of, and actually, this is a lot of where your 5S started here and in job methods is organizing. And then you have the way to actually train somebody. And then the other piece is the follow up, which is the coaching piece that you need as a leader. Now, the job relations.
Is working guys get? I have a set here. I got
Um,
mine from the TWI Institute. But where can people get those?
okay, so the guy that's retiring is the Bilas group.
These are
He
really
has
cool.
so he has a set of cards. He's laminated them. I think he sells a set. He'll mail it to you for like $10 a set.
Uh-huh.
So,
Because like back when I was first starting out in automotive, we used these kind of things all the time. I had
yeah,
one for statistical process control in my pocket, another little pocketbook like that. Super
yeah.
useful.
And so job relations is an interesting one. We're not going into it that much.
Mm-hmm.
Job relations actually is a proactive reactive. So the proactive is you have a problem. And basically the stuff's already hit the fan. And so the reactive side of job methods tells you step one, you can just basically, you've got to get all the facts. Then you weigh and decide, then you choose, and you actually make almost a breakdown of, okay, what am I going to do? What do I expect? And then the follow-up is you make sure, did the actions I take actually deliver on what I needed? And the big drive of doing the job relations back in the 40s was they wanted to keep people from just getting mad at an employee and firing them. They wanted to back up a little bit, try to understand why the problem happened, and learn how to deal more equitably with employees. And this is also job relations is the reason Toyota one of the reasons Toyota actually got into and started looking at the TWI programs is they had a strike and the union refused to return to work until management had taught their supervisors how to treat the workers like human beings. So, but I have modified this. So, like with the Toyota kata, if you look at the kata that the senseis do, there's basically a dozen habits, and every one of them are embedded somehow in functional pieces that you do in the TWI programs. So the 12 steps, I tried to coach all 12 steps at one time. It fails. So I went back and I coached the first 5 steps. And what I found is if I could get people to do these habits to start with, then the rest of it just, falls into place. So I've put this as my reactive, basically the reactive side of JR. And then the proactive side is basically the behaviors that a leader needs to do. And if you're doing 2-second lean, you're doing all of these pieces. So, and we've modified, this is some other materials basically on the PDCA telling you about the objectives, your plan, do, see sequence. And I can give people copies of this. I've got PDFs of that, and you can print your own cards if you want.
I think, guys, for me, at least for the supervisory team leader level within organizations, like training them specifically on this stuff and having follow-ups and do a briefing. Right, guys, go away and do this for a week. Come back and tell us what behaviors you did that matched this and where you didn't, and learn together. I think that's like a 2-second lean approach to using this material.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the Kaizen. But basically, the job methods is an industrial engineering program light with no engineering nomenclature put into it. And Ono pretty much exhausted it in the first 5 years. And that's why they brought Shingo in to teach enough industrial engineering material that they could actually begin to develop standard work. But it actually has a very structured method to look at all the facts and then come in and challenge pieces. And you do have a layered way of doing it. And the very first challenge piece is basically a test of necessity. Why is it necessary? What's the purpose of it? If you can't answer those, eliminate that step. If you think it's necessary, and then you can tell me the purpose of it, forcing you to think about what's the purpose of it may trigger you to think of a better way to get the same effect. So, the next piece is like, where should it be done? When should it be done? And the last section is who and how. So if I'm down to one person doing it, that probably means I need to start doing some simplification, because if you only have one person in the whole organization who's capable of doing it, it's probably way too complex and needs to be improved. So, questions? And this is a nice little poster I like to print out and give to people. And like if I use Ono's thing, it's like without a process, you can't have an improvement. I'm in the same piece. Basically, if you haven't done a breakdown, you don't understand the process well enough. If you can't explain all of this in the understand piece, you don't know enough to really effectively create an improved process.
And again, Mark, for this kind of approach, you're not looking at a 2-second lean. You're looking at we're going to have a focused effort workshop approach to process X a lot of the time. Are you?
Yeah. So, okay. So the good piece about the 2-second lean is It's probably been the most effective way of getting employee engagement and getting the culture going the right direction.
100%.
And what I have seen in the couple of places I've gone to that do the 2-second lean is they have the people really engaged. They have everything nice and clean and organized. They've exhausted, if you've done it a year or so, you've probably exhausted most of the low-hanging fruit. And then you're at a loss of, so how can I improve without just doing the sweeping and cleaning every day? What can I do? And so now we need to start looking at it from a process level.
Yeah.
You've got the people part down. Now let's look at the process.
That's what I've seen myself and talking to other people in the 2-second lean world. I'm not going to name any names, but you've got that culture piece, which is nothing better for. But I'll not name them, but they'll probably be able to identify themselves from this little anecdote. Toyota came into their factory, and it's not Ryan Tierney. Toyota came into their factory, and they were going like, "Oh, well, what data do you collect? What data do you have on your process?" And they went, "Oh, we don't collect data. We just fix things. That's what we do." And Toyota went, "You're joking, aren't you?" And they were they were unconvinced to start with, but as soon as they started collecting critical process data and analyzing, they saw how blind they were, and it was a huge deal. So now, and where the school, my own personal lean journey, we were collecting the data till the cow came home and not doing enough action, which is typical in a large organization, in my experience. So for me, the sequence of get your culture right with 2-second lean, and then get into the more advanced tools and get into collecting data that you're going to act upon with that same action this day culture. That's where the magic happens.
Yep. So
sorry if I've got
no, I mean,
there.
I'm about, so I can say the same thing. I've gone into, like, one of the companies I like to show when I'm in Asia is a company that had been basically the government had been sending people there to see, oh, here's a lean company, collects the data, everything's all nice and clean and shiny, everybody's organized. But in 5 years of organizing it for flow, we have increased productivity 10 times, same footprint of a factory, increased staffing maybe 10 or 15%. But a lot of it is just, it was improving OEE, improving quality. I mean, it's 1,000 little things that we did.
Yep. Get it.
Oh, and this is the job tree that I was talking about earlier, courtesy of David Meyer. So if you want to read a book on how Toyota uses it, the book is called Toyota Talent. And I always tell people, if you're doing flow or if you're doing lean, everybody is trying to put in pull. They need to realize that Ono considered this a countermeasure. His goal was to try to create flow. So flow where you can, pull where you can. So the pull or the Kanban system and such is only a countermeasure. It's like an intermediate step to perfection. I will share this slide deck with anybody that wants it. Just send me an email.
That's Mark at Tesla.
Mark Tesla2 at Gmail.
Mark, all one word, Mark Tesla2 at Gmail. Yep,
right there.
Mark.tesla2 at gmail.com. Beautiful. Right, questions for Mark, and don't let me do any more talking, please.
So I did one more. So this is how, we can do the job tree, and they go down, they go through, and you look at each task. We make sure that they understand the purpose of it. Are any of them difficult or tedious? Is it clear? And then we share all this and we have the team choose. And this is how you begin to choose where to start first. You know, do I have something that, you know, that process, oh, no problem. Oh, mostly no problems or concerns. So your real focus is, you know, fix what bugs you. Anyway,
Mhm. Right. Questions.
we're back.
We're back with Mark.
Yeah.
Well,
Did I drown
Mark,
you?
yeah, I'd say like most people, I'm feeling a bit like shell shocked because it's so much. Like what you gave us an overview on is literally weeks
Okay.
worth of training, weeks and weeks worth of training that when it's done to its full extent, isn't that true? So it's not really much of a shock.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
So 10 or 15 years ago, I sat in on a number of certified job instruction trainers delivering the training. And I was so disappointed because I had background knowledge and have gone through all the original trainer's material. And I ended up writing a trainer's guide. So this little book basically is how to deliver it if you're going to deliver it, how to do all the coaching afterwards, what each, I mean, it's like, it's both the all the details on the structured delivery, but also what do you do after the fact. And I found it was the execution side is the really critical piece. And one of my projects that I'm working on this week is that one. This is Toyota's training manual for their first year supervisors, and it goes through all three of the programs. And I'm trying to get the Productivity Press to translate it and make it available in English. Right now, there's a number of things on Toyota that's you just don't have access to here in the States.
Sure.
Quick
So,
question for you, Mark.
oh yeah,
So, you know, I understand TWI. I've seen all this. Where do I start? You know, where do I go to get me to start? You know, perhaps the books. Where do I find this information? I know some of it you may have shared. Where do I go? Where do I start?
um, so you're in New Zealand, aren't you?
Yeah.
He
Do
is.
you realize that you had the most advanced TWI program in the world before the government pulled the plug in '87? They focused it specifically towards smaller companies, and they were coached by one of the originators of the program for 20 years while they did the development work on it. But a lot of what they discovered is one, and this is what Toyota discovered. Toyota, all of their top managers went through all three programs. And at the end, the C-suite says, is that enough? Then they said, well, maybe not. Then they went through a thing called MTP program, which is 22 sessions on a, you know, it was a weekend program like a mini MBA. And so they spent 22 weeks. Everybody in the top management down to managers went through and learned how to execute, how to actually deliver this stuff, not just the beginning pieces of JI. So you have to start at the top. If the top people don't know the habits, don't follow the habits, you know, you've just wasted your time and money. But part of the piece that we discovered here in the US midway through delivering it in the 40s is there's a big difference between the companies that are successful and the companies that are not. And it was always, did the top leader learn it, do it? Did they change their behaviors? If you didn't participate, and this is what we found out in lean as well, and then the 2-second lean. If the leader doesn't participate, you know, if you expect other people to do it, it's just not going to stick. So you've got to see, how does this integrate with my current systems? Can I learn some of it? I want to try it out. I want to get somewhat proficient. You need to get proficient enough that you can coach your direct reports. So, and I want anybody that wants I can give you the delivery guide for the job instruction and the trainer's guide. New Zealand had a lot of materials that I have on a PDF. I can send that to people as well if you're, game on wading through it. So I'm open to sharing it to everyone.
So would you start? So like with lean, we talk about starting in the bathroom, right? So we're starting with a really small process that, if we, so where would we start with TWI? Would we start with, for example, the likes of the bathroom, a simple process that even if we muck it up, we're not going to do any damage to the thing? Or do we start with a process which is actually causing us grief, which is probably the problem we want to solve or get solved? Bearing in mind we don't know how to implement at this stage, are we better off starting?
Okay, so I do what I call a heat map. And so if you've already done the 2-second lean, you've got everybody on board, you've done a lot of your 3S'ing, you've done the bathroom piece, then it's like, let's go through and let's pick out your top products or services that you deliver. Let's walk through the steps at a high level, pick out the area that you're struggling with the most.
I think, Mark, if I can stop you for a sec,
Okay.
How I can short that is if you had Mark Warren coming to visit you tomorrow, which process would you work on? That's the easy way, because I'm doing that for Lumen Electronics as Mark's talking, and I can pick a top one, and within a few seconds, I can pick another 3 or 4 that we know are weak. We know you have to be super skilled to do them, and they're not easy processes. So to get,
So I guess so my
yeah.
question is, so we can't get Mark in, right? So we're
Yeah.
having to learn ourselves, right?
Mhm.
Well, I'm game
start
to
with
come
that.
to New Zealand again. Just get me
Keep
a ticket.
suggesting it's becoming affordable. But if we're going to do this ourselves, do we start and practice and learn the concepts of TWI before we start tackling that problem? Like if you came, this is the problem that I would give you because this is what we need to solve. But if I haven't got you coming here, do I need to learn some of the skills first, or do I just give it a bash and hope that something's better than nothing and we'll reiterate and keep reiterating on, but working on a big problem?
Okay, so we can do it like give it a bash, as you say. But I do what I call a heat map. I do the top level flow. And I said, okay, so where's the problematic department or process? Usually, so if I do it like from departments, where do I have the most struggle? Then I would say, if whatever that department is, I go down a level. What does that department do? Give me a list of 5 or 10 items. Which one of those is the most problematic? And you can cascade down, pick that out, try to do a breakdown on it. Force yourself into thinking through, here's this step. What are the key points? I think you're going to discover for yourself all sorts of solutions just by the structure of.
So just to try to boil that into a nugget, if that's a
Give it
thing,
a crack.
is to give the job breakdown a crack at a tough process. So
Yeah.
the job breakdown, like the card, Mark, like being really simplistic about it, it's that slide from the presentation. Don't apply the 4 rules of not doing it at your desk, get your best people involved, etc. Go to the process, and then you have a process of writing down each step, putting the what and the how and the why, and then breaking it down, and then you're going to come up with what your improvements are going to be and how you're going to train people to do that process.
And so even when you get down to an actual step level, you could say, okay, this particular step is highly problematic. Then you could say, in the key points, usually there's 1 or 2 key points that are the root cause of most of your issues. So it basically forces you to get down to a level of granularity and solve it from that standpoint.
Mhm.
So
Could I ask just a quick question
yeah,
on what you were saying earlier on about the number of steps to have? If I'm thinking about like a product that we make, like a draw box, um, did you say that you should have only like only a few main steps,
yeah,
and then if you've got too many, break it up into different job breakdowns? Have I understood that correctly?
absolutely. So when I'm first laying it out, I don't worry about how many steps. It may be 20 or 25 steps. Then when your three people go through starting to do the training, they get a feel of what's a good chunk. It could be 2 or 3 steps. It could be 5 steps. It could be a single step. And you can pick out what needs to be done. They will see the natural breaks in the training. So it's like you'll know it when you get there.
Thank you.
Yep. And
I
it
think
isn't rocket science either. And I have watched experts argue with each other. And so what works for you, what's effective for you, that's what I'm going to call correct.
Mhm. Guys, we'll give it 8 more minutes tops,
Okay.
or my boss is going to be giving me grief.
Okay.
Any more questions, though? I think Phil, yours was the best question. No offense to everybody else. That's the one we were all burning to have asked.
Well,
Where to start?
yeah, so I had a lot of common mistakes. So I've
Mark,
listed,
would you have a reading list for us that you could maybe even publish? And almost everybody that's here is in the Improvement Starts with I Signal group, so you could just pop it in there.
okay. Um, so I'll also I've gone to Drew's plant and to Will's plant. I'm basically retired. What I'm doing is I'm still educating myself on what, the Japanese are doing.
Mm.
Uh, but I'm doing pro bono visits to different factories. I'm planning on doing a few this year. So we can talk about that if your people are curious to get me in for a
Mhm.
few days.
If I had a decent sized factory, I'd have you, but I don't. And these days, I'm totally focused on software and as a remote team and everything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, guys, it's just from everybody I've spoken to that's had Mark in their facility, it's an amazing experience. So,
And during the pandemic, I did an experiment. I actually coached a dozen different facilities around the world via basically the Google Meet feature.
mhm,
So I would give assignments. We would set up discussions twice a week. You would pick out like a process that you wanted to do a breakdown on. You would shoot a short video. You would do your breakdown. You post it in a shared folder. I would review it and give you feedback. And I found that it didn't take very long for people to master doing the breakdowns. And we did breakdowns, we did problem solving, we did setup reductions, that sort of thing. So if anybody wants to play with something like that, I'm game
mhm,
to. We can start something like that as well
mhm,
for those in the
mhm,
group.
mhm. What do you think, guys? Is there any interest in that? Do you want to throw a message into the group? I think we can take Brendan. He'd be interested in that as it is. If you want to put it in the chat, if you're interested in participating in such a group, that would be really cool. There's Jacob, Bill, and we can continue that in the Signal group. So I'll put a post into the Signal group, and anybody that's keen, then we can get that set up.
Okay.
Okay. So look, yeah, I'm gonna go now. I'll be five
Well,
minutes early.
well,
Any burning questions before we hit the road? So yeah, I just like echo what everybody's saying. Thanks so much, Mark, for giving us your time again. Every time, even though sometimes it feels like a fire hose in a drinking session, it still it makes me realize how little I know.
Well,
But that makes me hungry to learn.
but the struggle is trying to figure out what pieces to talk about. So, and when you go into a facility, a particular problem, it's always, what's the solution? Well, it depends. There's so many factors. So, yeah.
Okay then, guys. Well, look, thanks again, Mark. Thanks everybody for their time and coming along. Much appreciated. Sure, and we'll see if we're going to take this to another level.
All right.
Okay.
Hey, thanks,
Cheers,
Mark. Really
everyone.
appreciate it. You're
Thanks so
awesome.
much. Thanks,
Thank you very much.
everybody.